The wind across the Montana Territory in the winter of 1883 did not whisper. It screamed, a relentless, bone-deep cold that turned breath to ice and made every step a small battle for survival. The sky hung low and gray-heavy with the promise of more snow, and the land stretched out in endless white, unforgiving and vast. This was a place where the weak died and the strong learned humility, where nature did not care about your plans, your dreams, or your regrets. It simply was immense and indifferent. If you saw someone dying in a blizzard and you knew that saving them might kill you, what would you do? That question hung in the frozen air like a ghost waiting for an answer that would change everything. A single point of orange light flickered against the white void. A man on horseback, his coat pulled tight against the wind, moved slowly through the drifts. The horse's breath came in great plumes of steam, each exhalation a small cloud that vanished instantly into the freezing air. The rider sat hunched forward, eyes scanning the tree line ahead, his face hidden beneath the brim of a worn hat and a scarf wrapped tight against the cold. Jacob Thornton, 38 years old, a man who had learned that survival was not the same as living. Then he heard it. Faint at first, almost lost in the howl of the wind. A sound that did not belong to the wilderness. A human voice, weak and desperate, crying out somewhere in the white expanse. A woman's voice, pleading in a language he did not understand, and then in broken English, "Please, please don't hurt me." Jacob pulled his horse to a stop. His gloved hand went instinctively to the rifle at his saddle. He sat perfectly still, listening. The voice came again, closer now, through the pines to his left. He could hear other sounds too, men's voices, rough, cruel, laughing. He dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots sinking deep into the snow. He moved toward the sound, his steps careful and deliberate. The rifle was in his hands now, cold metal against his palms even through the gloves. Through a gap in the pines he saw them. 3 men, rough and brutal-looking, stood in a small clearing. They wore heavy coats and hats, their faces red from the cold, and something else. Meanness, the kind that came from years of taking what they wanted and never facing consequences. They were dragging a small figure through the snow, a woman, Chinese. Her hands were bound with rope, her face bruised and swollen, her black hair matted with ice and blood. One of the men, broad-shouldered with a cruel mouth and eyes like chips of flint, yanked her to her feet by her hair. She stumbled, her legs giving out beneath her. He kicked her in the ribs hard enough that Jacob heard the impact even from 20 yards away. "Please," she gasped, her voice breaking. "Please don't hurt me. I can't walk." The man laughed. It was not the sound of humor. It was the sound of someone who had forgotten what mercy meant if he had ever known it at all. "Last time you run, girl," he snarled. "Last goddamn time. You understand me?" She did not answer. Could not answer. She was curled on her side in the snow, her body shaking with cold and pain and fear. The man raised his boot again. Jacob did not think, did not hesitate. He raised the rifle and fired into the air. The crack of the gunshot echoed across the valley, sharp and final, rolling through the pines like thunder. The sound shattered, the moment froze everything in place. The 3 men spun around, hands going to their weapons. They saw Jacob standing at the edge of the clearing, rifle leveled, his eyes hard and cold as the winter sky. "Let her go," Jacob said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. There was no anger in it, no heat, just certainty. Now. The broad-shouldered man, the one who had kicked her, straightened slowly. He was older than Jacob had first thought, maybe 45, with gray threading through his dark beard. His eyes were calculating, taking Jacob's measure, looking for weakness, looking for fear, finding neither. "Old man," he said slowly, his hand resting on the pistol at his belt, "you don't want to be part of this. This is private business, between me and my property." Jacob did not lower the rifle. The barrel remained steady, pointed at the man's chest. "On Montana soil, no one is property." The man's face darkened. His jaw clenched. "You got no idea what you're stepping into, friend. That girl there, she belongs to me. Legal and proper. I got papers. Your papers don't mean anything to me." They mean something to the law. Then the law and I will have a conversation, after you leave." The other two men had spread out slightly, flanking their leader. One of them, younger with a thin face and nervous eyes, kept glancing between Jacob and his boss, waiting for a signal. The third man, older and scarred, just watched with dead eyes, his hand already on his gun. The leader's smile was thin and sharp as a knife blade. "You just made a big mistake, old man. The biggest of your life. I've made worse." The young one, the nervous one, could not wait any longer. His hand darted for his pistol. Jacob moved faster. The rifle cracked, and the gun flew from the young man's hand before he had cleared leather, spinning away into the snow. The man yelped and clutched his fingers, blood already seeping through his glove where the bullet had grazed him. The leader held up a hand, stopping the scarred man from drawing. His eyes never left Jacob's face. "All right," he said, his voice tight with controlled rage. "All right. You want to play hero, fine. We'll go. But you listen to me, and you listen good. That girl is mine. I own her. And I always take back what's mine." "Good," Jake said quietly. "Then you'll know where to find me when you try." The leader's smile was all edges, now nothing but venom and promise. "I'll remember your face, old man. See that you do." The three men backed away slowly, their boots crunching in the snow. The young one was still whimpering, holding his injured hand. The scarred one never took his eyes off Jacob, his expression promising violence delayed, but not forgotten. And the leader, the one with the cold eyes and the cruel mouth, stared at Jacob for a long moment before turning away. "We'll be seeing you soon," he called over his shoulder. "Real soon." Then they were gone, swallowed by the trees and the swirling snow, leaving only tracks and the echo of their threat hanging in the cold air. Jacob did not lower the rifle until the sound of their horses had faded completely. Only then did he let out the breath he had been holding. He walked over to the woman. She was still curled on the ground, shaking violently, her eyes squeezed shut. He knelt beside her, moving slowly so as not to startle her. "You're safe now," he said softly. "They're gone." Her eyes opened. They were dark brown, almost black, and filled with a terror so deep it made something in Jacob's chest ache. She stared at him as if trying to decide whether he was real or just another nightmare. "I'm going to help you. I won't hurt you. Do you understand?" She nodded just barely. A tiny movement of her head. "Good. I'm going to cut these ropes. Don't move." He pulled a knife from his belt. The blade was sharp and well-maintained, one of the few things from his old life he had kept in good condition. He sliced through the ropes binding her wrists. They fell away into the snow, and he saw the raw bleeding skin beneath. The ropes had been tied so tight they had cut deep into her flesh. But it was worse than that. There were older scars too, marks from shackles, from chains, from years of being bound. He felt a cold anger settle in his chest, hard and sharp as the knife in his hand. "Can you stand?" she tried. She pushed herself up with her arms, tried to get her legs under her, but they would not hold. She collapsed back into the snow with a small cry of pain and frustration. "My legs," she whispered. "I can't. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Not for this. Not ever." He sheathed the knife and carefully, gently lifted her into his arms. She was so light it frightened him. Nothing but skin and bone beneath the thin, ragged dress she wore. She flinched when he touched her, every muscle in her body going rigid with fear, but she did not fight him. "I have a ranch 2 miles west. There's a fire. Food. You'll be safe there." She looked up at him, searching his face for something. Truth, maybe. Or just the absence of cruelty. Whatever she found there, it made her relax just slightly in his arms. "Thank you," she whispered. He carried her through the snow to his horse. The animal stood patient and steady, its dark eyes watching them without alarm. Jacob lifted her carefully into the saddle, then swung up behind her. She leaned back against him, her body still trembling with cold and shock, and he wrapped his coat around her as much as he could. "Hold on." He urged the horse forward, moving as quickly as he dared through the deepening snow. The wind had picked up again, driving ice crystals into their faces like tiny needles. The woman in his arms was slipping in and out of consciousness, her head lolling against his chest. He kept talking to her, his voice low and steady, trying to keep her awake. "Stay with me. Just a little longer. We're almost there." Behind them, unseen in the white blur of the storm, 3 sets of eyes watched from the shadows of the pines. The leader of the 3 men sat on his horse, his face dark with fury, while the young one wrapped his bleeding hand, and the scarred one just waited patient as stone. "Follow them," the leader said. "I want to know exactly where that old bastard lives, and then we're going to pay him a visit he won't forget." 5 years ago, Jacob Thornton had been a different man. The memory rose unbidden in his mind as he rode, as vivid and painful as it had been the day it happened. Sarah laughing, her red hair catching the afternoon sunlight like copper wire. She was standing in the doorway of the cabin, flour on her hands, from baking bread, smiling at him with those green eyes that had first made him fall in love when he was just 20 years old. Emma, their daughter, only 6 years old, sitting on the fence rail of the corral, her small hand waving as he rode out to check on the herd in the north pasture. "I'll be back in 3 days," he had called to them. 4 at most. "We'll be here," Sarah had called back. "We'll always be here." That was the last time he saw them alive. He had been gone 4 days, buying cattle in Butte City, 100 miles east. The deal had taken longer than expected. He had sent word that he would be delayed, but the telegram never arrived. Some problem with the lines. When he finally started the journey home, he rode hard, pushing himself and his horse, eager to see his family again. He arrived at sunset. The ranch was silent. Too silent. No smoke from the chimney, no light in the windows, no sound of Sarah singing or Emma playing, just silence thick and heavy as a burial shroud. He found them in the bedroom. Sarah was in the bed, her red hair spread across the pillow, her face pale as marble. Emma was curled beside her, one small hand still clutching her mother's nightgown. The red fever had taken them both. It had swept through Helena and the surrounding ranches like wildfire, killing dozens in a matter of days. The doctor in Helena told him later, when Jake finally rode to town, that there had been nothing anyone could have done. The fever came fast and brutal. Sarah had gotten sick trying to ride to town for help for Emma, and then the sickness had taken her, too. They had died within hours of each other, alone in that cabin, waiting for him to come home. Jacob had buried them on the hill overlooking the valley in a spot where Sarah had loved to watch the sunset. He made 2 crosses from pine wood and carved their names with his own hands. Sarah Thornton, beloved wife. Emma Thornton, beloved daughter. And then he had gone back to the cabin and tried to figure out how to keep breathing. For 5 years he had existed, not lived, just existed. He worked the ranch because it was what he knew how to do. He tended the cattle, repaired fences, chopped wood, survived the winters. He went to Helena once every 2 months for supplies. He spoke to people only when absolutely necessary, using as few words as possible. The townsfolk learned to leave him alone. Jake Thornton, they called him, the ghost of Silver Creek. He told himself that if he worked hard enough, exhausted himself completely, the dreams would stop. The nightmares of Sarah calling his name, of Emma, crying for him, of arriving home just a few hours earlier, and maybe being able to save them. The dreams never stopped. They came every night, relentless as the Montana winter. But this morning something had shifted. He had woken from the nightmare, as always, drenched in sweat, despite the cold, his heart pounding. But instead of just lying there in the dark waiting for dawn, he had gotten up. He had lit the lamp and glanced at the photographs, Sarah and Emma, before the fever. And for the first time in 5 years, he thought, maybe it's time to stop hiding. Maybe it's time to start living again. He had saddled his horse and ridden to Helena. He told himself it was just for supplies. But deep down in the part of himself he had tried to bury, he knew it was more. It was the first step. The first small act of choosing to engage with the world again instead of just enduring it. And then, on the way home, He had heard the woman's cry. The ranch came into view as the last light faded from the sky. It was not much. A log cabin with a stone chimney, solid and well built, but showing the wear of 5 years of minimal care. A barn that needed new shingles, a corral with fences that needed mending, but smoke rose from the chimney. He had left a fire burning that morning, banking it carefully so it would last all day. He dismounted and carefully lifted the woman down from the saddle. She stirred her eyes, fluttering open confusion and fear mixing in her expression. "Where am I?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Safe? You're safe now." He carried her inside, shouldering the door open and stepping into the warmth. The cabin was simple. One main room with a stone fireplace, a table and chairs, a small kitchen area, a door leading to the single bedroom, shelves lined with books, a rocking chair by the fire where Sarah used to sit and knit. Everything clean and orderly, but empty of life, like a museum of a life that used to be. He laid her on a pallet of furs near the fireplace, the warmth of the room hitting them both like a physical thing after the brutal cold outside. She was still shivering violently, her teeth chattering. He added more wood to the fire, building it up until the flames roared and the heat filled the room. Then he filled a kettle with water from the bucket by the door and hung it over the fire to boil. She watched him, her eyes following his every movement. She was afraid. He could see it in the tension of her body, in the way her hands clenched into fists, in the way she flinched every time he came near. She was waiting for the kindness to end, for the cruelty to begin. That was what she had learned to expect from men. He understood. So he sat down across the room from her, deliberately putting distance between them, giving her space, giving her control. "I'm going to make some tea," he murmured. "You should drink something warm, but I'll stay over here. You take your time." She stared at him as if trying to understand why he was doing this. Then she nodded, just barely. The kettle began to steam and then to whistle. He poured hot water into 2 tin cups, added some dried herbs that Sarah had taught him to harvest years ago, and carried one over to where the woman lay. But instead of handing it to her, he set it on the floor beside her pallet, then stepped back. "When you're ready." She looked at the cup, then at him, then back at the cup. Slowly, carefully, she reached for it. Her hands were shaking so badly that the tea sloshed over the rim, but she managed to bring it to her lips. She drank in small, careful sips, and he saw some of the color begin to return to her face. Jacob carried his own cup back to his chair and sat down. He drank his tea and watched the fire, giving her privacy to recover, to think, to decide whether she could trust him. The silence stretched out between them, not uncomfortable, just heavy with unspoken things. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters, but inside the cabin it was warm and quiet and safe. Finally she spoke. Her voice was hoarse and rough, but stronger than before. "Thank you for saving me, for bringing me here. You don't need to thank me." "Yes," she said, and there was something fierce in her voice, despite its weakness. "Yes, I do. You could have ridden past. Most would have. I'm not most people." "No." She studied him with those dark, intelligent eyes. "No, you are not." He looked at her, then really looked at her. She was young, maybe 27 or 28. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen nearly shut, her lip split and crusted with dried blood. But even through the damage he could see a quiet strength in the set of her jaw, in the way she held herself. Her black hair was matted with dirt and ice and blood, but her eyes were clear and sharp, and missed nothing. "What's your name, Maylin?" she said. Her pronunciation was careful, precise. "Maylin Chen. Jacob Thornton. Most people call me Jake." She tried to smile, but it hurt too much. The split in her lip opened again, a thin line of fresh blood appearing. She touched it with her finger, then looked at the blood as if it belonged to someone else. "Jake," she repeated softly, testing the name. "Thank you, Jake." He stood and went to the cupboard, returning with a clean cloth and a basin of water. "I'm going to set this here. You can clean yourself up if you want. There's a bedroom through that door, clean clothes in the chest. They were my wife's. You're welcome to them." Your wife. She died 5 years ago, her and my daughter. Maylin's expression softened, the wariness fading slightly. I am sorry. So am I. He returned to his chair. She picked up the cloth and began to carefully clean the blood from her face, wincing at every touch. When she was done, she looked at him again. The men who had me, they will come back. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact delivered with the certainty of someone who had learned the hard way that cruelty always returned. I know. Then why did you help me? They will hurt you. Maybe kill you, maybe. But some things are worth the risk. She shook her head slowly, as if he was a puzzle she could not solve. Most people, they do not think like that. Most people, they think only of themselves. Most people haven't lost everything that mattered. When you've got nothing left to lose, you can afford to do the right thing. She absorbed that in silence. Then she said very quietly, I think you have more to lose than you know. He did not answer. He was not sure what to say to that. They sat in the quiet for a while longer. The fire crackled. The wind moaned around the eaves. And slowly, gradually, Maylin's eyes began to close. The warmth and the safety and the sheer exhaustion of survival finally caught up with her. Sleep, Jake said softly. I'll keep watch. You're safe here. Her eyes opened one more time, just a crack, and she looked at him with something that might have been trust, or might have been just too much weariness to be afraid anymore. Thank you, she whispered. Then she was asleep. Jacob sat in his chair and watched over her as the night deepened. He added wood to the fire when it burned low. He checked the rifle and the pistol, making sure both were loaded and ready. He listened to the wind and thought about the men who would come. Because they would come. Men like that always did. But for the first time in 5 years, the cabin did not feel empty. There was life here again. Someone to protect, something to fight for. It scared him how much that mattered, how much it felt like coming back to life after being dead for so long. Outside, the snow fell soft and steady, covering the tracks they had made, covering the blood in the clearing where he had found her. And somewhere out there in the darkness, Clayton Blackwood was making his plans. Morning came cold and bright, the sky a hard blue that hurt to look at. Jacob woke in his chair, his back stiff and his neck aching. He had dozed off some time in the hours before dawn, the exhaustion finally catching up with him. The fire had burned down to embers, and the room had grown cold. He stood and stretched, feeling every one of his 38 years in his joints and muscles. He rebuilt the fire, adding kindling and then larger pieces of wood until the flames caught and began to throw heat again. Only then did he look over at the pallet where Maylin had been sleeping. She was awake, sitting up watching him with those dark, careful eyes. She looked better. The color had returned to her face, and though the bruises were still dark and painful-looking, there was an alertness in her expression that had been absent the night before. How do you feel? Better? She touched her face gingerly. Still hurt, but better. Good. Are you hungry? Yes, very hungry. He moved to the small kitchen area and began pulling out supplies. Eggs, a slab of bacon wrapped in cloth, some bread that was a few days old but still edible. He was not a good cook. That had been Sarah's domain. She had moved through this kitchen with easy confidence, creating meals that were simple but good. He had never paid much attention, assuming she would always be there to do it. That was a mistake he regretted every day. He cracked eggs into a skillet, but they cooked unevenly, the edges turning brown and crispy while the centers stayed runny. He put the bacon in another pan, but he forgot about it while dealing with the eggs, and it burned, turning black and filling the cabin with smoke. He opened the door to let the smoke out, cursing under his breath. Behind him he heard a sound, small and quickly stifled. He turned and saw Maylin with her hand over her mouth. Her shoulders were shaking slightly. She was laughing, trying not to, but failing. Despite everything, despite the pain she must be in and the fear she must feel, she was laughing at his terrible cooking. And despite himself, Despite 5 years of being unable to find anything funny, Jake smiled. Then he started to chuckle. And then he was laughing too, the sound rusty and strange in his own ears. "I know," he said, gesturing at the disaster on the stove. "I'm terrible at this. Sarah, my wife, she used to cook. She tried to teach me, but I never paid attention. Figured I'd never need to know." The laughter faded from Maylin's face, replaced by something softer. Understanding. She pushed herself up from the pallet, moving slowly and carefully, wincing with each movement. She limped over to the stove, favoring her left leg heavily. I helped. Jake looked at her, at the determination in her face despite the obvious pain. "You should rest." She shook her head. "I want to help. I can do this." "All right." She pointed at the salt shaker. He handed it to her. She sprinkled just a tiny bit over the eggs, then tasted them with a spoon. She made a face, then added a little more salt, some pepper. She moved the bacon to a cooler part of the stove, scraping off the worst of the burned parts. She worked efficiently, her movements economical and practiced. When she was done, she scooped the eggs onto 2 plates, added the bacon, and some bread. She handed one plate to Jake and took the other for herself. They sat at the small wooden table, and Jake took a bite. It was better. Not good, but better. Edible, at least. "You're better at this than me." She smiled just a little. "My mother, she teach me, before she die. I'm sorry. Long time ago, when I was small." They ate in silence for a while. The food was warm and filling, and Jake realized he had not eaten since the morning before. He had been so focused on getting to Helena and back that he had forgotten about food. When they finished, he cleared the plates and poured them both more tea. He sat back down, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then his eyes drifted to the photograph on the mantel, the one of Sarah and Emma smiling at the camera, frozen in a moment of happiness that felt like it belonged to someone else's life now. Maylin followed his gaze. "Your family?" "Yes. Sarah, my wife, and Emma, my daughter." She was 6. Maylin's eyes softened with sorrow. "Where are they now?" "Gone. 5 years ago. Red fever. It came through Helena and the ranches. Killed dozens of people in just a few days. You were not here." "No." He stared at the photograph, at Sarah's smile. "I was in Butte City, buying cattle. I was supposed to be gone 3 days. But the deal took longer. I was gone 4. When I came back, they were already gone." Maylin reached across the table and placed her small, rough hand over his. She did not say anything. There were no words that would help, but the gesture, the simple human connection, said more than words could. "I am sorry, Jake. To lose family, it is the worst pain." "Yes." He looked at her hand on his, so small and delicate, but marked with scars and calluses. "Yes, it is." They sat like that for a long moment, 2 people who had lost everything, finding a small measure of comfort in shared grief. Finally, Jake cleared his throat and gently withdrew his hand. "What's your name? I mean, your full name." "How do you say it properly, Maylin Chen?" she said slowly, enunciating each syllable carefully. "In Chinese, family name come first. Chen is family name. Maylin is given name." "Maylin Chen," he repeated, trying to match her pronunciation. She smiled a real smile this time, despite the pain it caused. "Close enough, Jake. It's a beautiful name. What does it mean? May mean beautiful. Lin mean forest. Beautiful forest. Your parents chose well." She looked down at her hands. "I hope so. I hope they would be proud of who I am, not what I became. What you became was a survivor. That's something to be proud of." She looked up at him, tears shining in her eyes, but not falling. "You are a kind man, Jake. Too kind, maybe. There's no such thing as too kind. In this world, maybe there is. Kind men, they die young. Then I guess I'm lucky I'm not young anymore." She laughed, a small sound, but genuine. "Yes, maybe you are lucky." They sat together a while longer, and then Jake stood. "I need to do some work outside. The storm knocked down part of the fence. If I don't fix it, the cattle will wander, but you should rest. Stay by the fire. Keep warm." But she shook her head, standing up carefully. "I want to help. Your leg. I can still see. I can still think. Please, I do not want to just sit." He studied her for a moment, seeing the determination in her face, the need to be useful, to be more than just a victim being cared for. He understood that. He nodded. "All right. But if it hurts too much, you tell me. I will." They bundled up in heavy coats and went outside together. The sky was clear now, a brilliant blue that seemed to go on forever. The sun was bright, but gave no warmth. The temperature was well below freezing, and their breath came in thick plumes. Jake led the way to the section of fence that had collapsed under the weight of snow and wind. He fetched his tools from the barn, a hammer and nails wire and posts. He set to work driving posts into the frozen ground, stringing wire between them. Maylin sat on a stump nearby watching. She did not speak, just observed carefully. After a few minutes, she stood and limped over to where he was working. She pointed at the knot he was using to tie the wire to the post. She knelt down carefully in the snow, ignoring the obvious pain it caused her, and traced a different pattern with her finger. A different knot, more complex but stronger. She looked up at him expectantly. Jake studied the pattern, then tried it. The knot held better pulled tighter. He looked at her surprised. "Where did you learn that?" "My father. He was builder. He builds ships in San Francisco. Big ships. Beautiful ships. He teach me many things about ropes, about knots, about making things strong. He built ships." "Yes, before he die." Jake waited, sensing there was more. When she was ready, she continued. "My father, he was good man, hard worker, but he owed money to bad men. Chinese men, but bad. He could not pay. So they come to our house. They tell him, pay or we kill you." Jake's hands stilled on the wire. He listened. He tried to get money. He sell everything, but not enough. So they come again, and this time they not just talk. They kill him, in front of me and my mother. Then my mother, she die too, heart attack. She see my father killed, and her heart, it just stopped. "Jesus," Jake breathed. Maylin's voice was flat, now distant, as if she was talking about someone else's life. "I was alone, 23 years old, no money, no family. And these men, they say I owe them now. My father's debt is my debt. I say no, I say I am not property. But they laugh, and they sell me to a man named Blackwood for $500, like I am cow or chair. The man from yesterday, yes, Clayton Blackwood." She spoke the name like a curse. "He buy me, bring me here to Montana, far from anyone who know me, far from anyone who care. And for 4 years I work for him. I cook, I clean, I wash, and other things, terrible things." Jake felt the cold anger in his chest grow colder, harder. "He beat me when I was slow, when I talked back, when I looked at him wrong, when he was drunk and angry, when he was sober and bored. Always there was beating." Her hands were shaking now, but not from cold, from the memory. "I try to run away 3 times. First time I get 2 miles. They catch me. They beat me until I cannot stand. Second time I get 5 miles. They catch me again. Beat me worse, break my arm. See?" She held up her left arm, and Jake saw how it sat at a slightly wrong angle, poorly healed. "Third time, I get almost to Helena. I think maybe I am free, but they catch me. And this time Blackwood say he will kill me, to show others what happen when you run." She looked up at Jake, her eyes fierce despite the tears. "So I run again, 4th time, in the snow, in the cold. I think maybe I die. Maybe that is better than going back. And then you find me." Jake was silent. Then he said very clearly, very firmly, "They will never touch you again. Not while I'm breathing." She searched his face. "Why do you care? You do not know me." He looked out at the white expanse, at the mountains, rising in the distance, at the endless sky. "I couldn't save my wife. I couldn't save my daughter. I was gone when they needed me most. I've lived with that for 5 years. And maybe," he turned back to her, "maybe I can't change what happened to them. But I can save you, and I will." Maylin's eyes filled with tears, and this time they fell running down her bruised cheeks. "You are a good man, Jake Thornton. Too good for this world. No, I'm just a man who's tired of watching people die." They stood there together in the cold, and something passed between them, an understanding, a promise, a bond forged not in words but in shared pain and shared determination. "Come on," Jake said gently. "Let's finish this fence. Then we need to talk about what happens next." They worked together for another hour, Jake driving posts and stringing wire, while Mei Lin showed him better knots, more efficient ways to do things her father had taught her. When they were done, the fence was stronger than it had been before the storm. As they walked back to the cabin, Mei Lin said quietly, "They will come back, Blackwood and his men. They will not let me go. I know. What will we do? We'll be ready, and if we can't hold them off here, we'll go to Helena, find the sheriff. He's an old friend of mine, a good man named Daniel Wilson. If anyone can help, it's him. And if he cannot, then we keep fighting, until you're free, really, truly free." She stopped walking and looked at him. "You would do this, risk your life for me?" He met her eyes. "Sometimes, Mei Lin, the right thing to do is also the most dangerous thing to do. But that doesn't mean we don't do it." She nodded slowly. "Then I will fight too. I am not just victim, not anymore. I will stand with you. Good, because I'm going to need your help." They went inside, and Jake spent the afternoon teaching her things she would need to know. How to load the rifle, how to hold it, how to aim and breathe and squeeze the trigger gently. Her hands were small and the rifle was heavy, but she learned quickly. She was smart and focused and determined. After an hour of practice with the unloaded rifle, he took her outside and let her fire 3 shots at a tree. The first one went wide. The second clipped the bark. The third hit center mass. "You're a natural. My father, he teach me to focus. To see the target, to breathe. Same idea, different tool." As the sun began to set, they went back inside. Jake made stew this time with Mei Lin's guidance. It was better than breakfast. Not good, but better. Progress. They ate by the fire, the light casting long shadows across the room. Outside, the wind had picked up again, and snow was beginning to fall. Jake Mei Lin said quietly, "What will happen after this is over, after I am free? Where will I go? What will I do?" He thought about it for a moment. "Wherever you want. You'll be free. You can go to San Francisco, find your people. Or you can go somewhere new. Start over." He paused. "Or if you want, you could stay here. Help me rebuild this place. Not as a worker, as a partner. Equal shares, equal say." She stared at him. "A partner. You're smart. You're strong. You know things I don't." And I think he glanced at the photograph on the mantel. "I think Sarah would have liked you. I think she would have wanted me to keep living, not just existing." Mei Lin's eyes filled with tears again. "I would like that, Jake. Very much. To have a home, to have a partner, to build something good. Then it's settled. When this is over, we'll rebuild together." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Thank you, Jake, for everything, for saving me, for seeing me as person, not property, for giving me hope. You gave me something too, a reason to wake up in the morning, a reason to fight." They sat in the warmth and the firelight, two broken people who had found each other in the worst possible circumstances and were choosing against all odds to hope. But outside in the darkness, beyond the circle of light from the windows, eyes were watching. Vernon Pike, the scarred man from the clearing, sat on his horse at the edge of the trees. He had been there for hours, watching, taking note of everything. The layout of the ranch, the barn, the corral, the single door, the windows with their shutters. He watched the shadows move inside, saw the 2 figures sitting by the fire. He turned his horse and rode back toward Helena, toward the saloon where Clayton Blackwood was waiting. It was late when Vernon walked into the saloon. The place was crowded and loud, full of miners and ranchers and drifters drinking away their pay. Blackwood sat at a corner table, a bottle of whiskey in front of him, playing cards with 3 other men. He looked up when Vernon approached. Well, Vernon leaned down and spoke quietly. "They're at his ranch, Silver Creek, about 12 miles north of here, just the 2 of them. Old man and the girl. Blackwood's eyes narrowed. Defenses one door, 4 windows with shutters, barn and corral. Could approach from the east through the trees without being seen until we're close. How many men will we need? For him, Blackwood laughed a harsh sound. He's just one old man, but he's got spirit, I'll give him that. Better bring 6, maybe 8. Make sure. When, tomorrow at dawn, we ride out at 4, get there as the sun comes up. He won't be expecting us so soon. Vernon nodded. And the girl, we take her back alive. I need to make an example. Show the others what happens when they run. But the old man, Blackwood's smile was cold and sharp. The old man can die. Slow or fast, I don't care. But he dies for putting his hands on my property. What if he fights? Then we burn the place down with him in it. Vernon nodded again and left. Blackwood returned to his card game, but his mind was already on the morning, on the look that would be on the old man's face when he realized he had made a fatal mistake, on the lesson he would teach to anyone who thought they could interfere with his business. He had worked too hard, invested too much money to let one self-righteous rancher ruin everything. He had a network now. Chinese workers, Irish, Mexican, all bought and sold and controlled through fear. They worked his mines, his ranches, his brothels. They made him rich. And if word got out that someone could run, could find help, could escape the whole system, would collapse. Number. Mei Lin Chen would come back, and she would be an example. And the old man would be dead. Back at the ranch, Jake sat in his chair by the fire rifle across his knees. Mei Lin was asleep on the pallet wrapped in blankets, her breathing soft and even. But Jake did not sleep. He watched the door. He watched the windows. He listened to every sound, every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind. He knew they would come. Men like Blackwood always came back. The only question was when. He checked his weapons again. The rifle was loaded and ready. The pistol at his belt was loaded. He had extra ammunition in his pocket and more in the drawer of the table. He had done what he could to prepare. But he was one man, and Blackwood would bring others. If it came to a fight, the odds were not in his favor. But he had faced bad odds before. In the war 20 years ago, at Antietam and Gettysburg. He had learned that sometimes you fought not because you could win, but because not fighting was worse. He looked at Mei Lin sleeping peacefully for perhaps the first time in 4 years. She deserved better than what had been done to her. She deserved freedom, safety, a chance to build a life. And he would give her that chance, whatever it cost him. Family is not just blood, he thought. It's the people you choose to protect, the people you choose to fight for. He had made his choice. The wind howled outside and the fire burned low. Jake added more wood and settled in to wait for the dawn. Whatever was coming, he would be ready. Dawn came not with light, but with sound. The creak of leather, the soft crunch of boots in frozen snow. The whisper of men trying to move quietly, but failing because there were too many of them. And the winter morning was too still. Jake was awake, had been awake all night, watching and waiting. The moment he heard the first sound, he was on his feet, rifle in hand, moving to the window. He pulled back the edge of the shutter just enough to see. 8 men he counted, maybe 9 in the shadows, hard to tell in the pre-dawn darkness. They were spreading out, surrounding the cabin, moving with the practiced efficiency of men who had done this before. At their center, unmistakable even in silhouette, was Clayton Blackwood. Jake moved quickly and quietly to where Mei Lin slept. He touched her shoulder gently. She woke instantly, her eyes flying open, her body tensing. "They're here," he said quietly. "Stay low, stay away from the windows." She nodded and rolled off the pallet, crawling to the corner farthest from the door. Jake saw her hand go to the pistol he had given her the night before. Good. She was ready. He returned to the window. The men had stopped moving. They were in position now, rifles pointed at the cabin. Blackwood stepped forward close enough that Jake could see his face in the growing light. Thornton Blackwood's voice cut through the cold morning air like a blade. "I know you're in there. This is your last chance. Send the girl out and we'll leave. You can keep your life, keep your ranch, But if you make me come in there, I promise you'll regret it." Jake did not answer. He sighted down the rifle barrel, tracking Blackwood's movement. "I'm trying to be reasonable here," Blackwood continued. "The girl is my property. I have legal papers. She's bound to me for another 3 years to work off her father's debt. You're harboring stolen property that makes you a criminal." Still, Jake said nothing. Blackwood's patience, never very deep, snapped. "Fine. You want to die for a piece of Chinese trash, so be it." He turned to his men. "Burn them out. I want that girl alive, but the old man dies." Among the men stood Dutch Miller, a lean young gunslinger of 28 with nervous eyes. He'd signed on with Blackwood 6 months ago, told it was security work for legitimate business operations. But standing here watching an old man defend a terrified woman who couldn't even walk properly, watching her fight back with desperate courage through that window, something turned in Dutch's gut. This wasn't security work. This was murder. When Blackwood gave the order to burn them out, Dutch's hand didn't move toward his gun, Vernon noticed. "You got a problem, Miller?" Vernon asked, his voice low and dangerous. Dutch looked at the cabin, at the smoke already beginning to rise at the old rancher who'd shown more courage than any of them. "Yeah," he said simply. "I got a problem. I don't shoot women, and I don't burn folks alive. That's where I draw my line." Blackwood's head snapped around. "You're fired, Miller. Get out of my sight." "Gladly." Dutch mounted his horse, but before he rode away, he looked at Vernon. "You're better than this, Pike. You know you are." Then he was gone, disappearing into the trees. 2 of the men moved toward the cabin carrying torches they had lit from a small fire they must have built out of sight. Jake made his decision in an instant. He kicked open the shutter, raised the rifle, and fired. The shot cracked across the valley, sharp and final. One of the torches went flying as the man carrying it dove for cover. Jake worked the lever, chambering another round, and fired again. The second torchbearer dropped his torch in the snow and scrambled behind a tree. All hell broke loose. The men around the cabin opened fire. Bullets thudded into the log walls, splintered. The shutters shattered one of the windows. Jake dropped below the windowsill as wood fragments exploded around him. He crawled to another window on the opposite side and fired twice more, quick and accurate. He heard a man scream, saw another stagger back, clutching his leg. He shifted position, firing toward the wood pile where he'd seen movement. The bullet struck the corner post, splintering the wood. A shard flew like a knife, catching one of the men in the shoulder. The man Vernon Pike cursed and ducked lower, pressing his hand against the wound as blood began to seep through his coat. Inside the cabin, Mei Lin pressed herself against the wall, the pistol gripped in both hands. She was terrified but steady. Jake had taught her well. He caught her eye across the room and gave her a quick nod. She nodded back. The firing slackened for a moment as Blackwood's men took cover and reassessed. In that brief pause, Jake heard Blackwood shouting orders. "Circle around. Watch the back. Don't let them escape. And somebody get those goddamn torches lit again." Jake knew they could not hold out here. The cabin was sturdy, but not a fortress. Eventually the men would rush them or burn them out. He needed to change the equation. "Mei Lin, can you shoot through that window?" She looked at the window. He indicated, then nodded. "When I say I want you to fire 3 shots, doesn't matter if you hit anything. Just make noise. Make them think you're a real threat." "I am real threat," she said. And despite everything, Jake almost smiled. "Yes, you are. On my count. 1, 2, 3 now." Mei Lin raised the pistol and fired through the window. 1, 2, 3 shots, the reports loud in the confined space. Outside, men shouted and ducked. In that moment of confusion, Jake sprinted to the back of the cabin to the small rear door he rarely used. He yanked it open and slipped outside, rifle ready. The cold hit him like a fist. The snow was knee-deep here where it had drifted against the cabin wall. He waded through it, moving along the back of the cabin toward the corner. 2 of Blackwood's men were positioned at the rear, watching the back door. They had heard Mei Lin's shots and were focused on the cabin windows, expecting her to appear there. They never saw Jake coming. He emerged from behind the cabin like a ghost rifle already shouldered. The first man turned at the sound of snow crunching and caught the rifle butt in his face. He went down, hard blood spraying from his broken nose. The second man started to raise his weapon, but Jake was faster. He drove the rifle barrel into the man's stomach, doubling him over, then brought the stock down on the back of his head. The man collapsed into the snow and did not move. Jake took their weapons, a rifle and a pistol, and threw them as far as he could into the deep snow where they would not be easily found. Then he moved along the side of the cabin, using it for cover, working his way toward where he had last seen Blackwood. But Blackwood was not stupid. He had seen the two men at the rear go down. He knew the old rancher was outside now hunting them. He pulled back, ordering his remaining men to do the same, creating distance. "You're just making this harder on yourself, old man," Blackwood shouted. "You can't win." "There's too many of us." Jake did not waste breath answering. He was counting. 8 men to start. He had disabled 2. That left 6. Better odds, but still not good. And they would be more cautious now. He made his way back to the rear door and slipped inside. Maylin was exactly where he had left her pistol ready, her face pale but determined. "You are back, for now. But we can't stay here much longer. They'll burn us out eventually. So what we do, we make them think twice. We hurt them enough that they reconsider whether you're worth dying for. And then we run for Helena. It's our only chance." Outside, Vernon Pike crouched behind the water trough, blood seeping from a wound in his shoulder where a splinter of wood from Jake's second shot had caught him. He watched Blackwood pacing back and forth, fury radiating from him like heat. "I want that old man dead. You hear me, dead." "Boss," one of the younger men said nervously, "maybe we should pull back, come back with more men. He's better than we thought." Blackwood spun on him. "We're not pulling back. We finish this now. He's one man, one old man." "Are you telling me 6 of us can't handle one old man?" "He's not just any old man," Vernon said quietly. "I seen men like him in the war, the ones who survived the worst of it. They don't scare easy, and they don't quit." Blackwood glared at him. "Then we burn them out. Set fire to the barn. The smoke will flush them out or kill them. Either way, we win." Vernon nodded slowly. He did not like it. There was something about the old rancher that reminded him of men he had respected once long ago before the war broke him and made him into what he was now. But Blackwood paid well, and Vernon had learned not to think too much about the people he hurt. "Do it," Blackwood ordered. 2 men ran to the barn, keeping low and using what cover they could. They disappeared inside. A minute later, smoke began to rise from the barn roof, then flames bright orange against the gray morning sky. Jake saw it from the cabin window. He cursed softly. The barn was going up fast. The dry wood and old hay inside were perfect fuel, and the wind was blowing the smoke directly toward the cabin. "We need to go, now." Maylin grabbed the satchel they had packed the night before. Food, water, ammunition, blankets. Jake pulled on his heavy coat and helped Maylin into Sarah's old coat. They were as ready as they would ever be. "When I open the door, we run for the trees to the west. Don't stop, don't look back. Just run. I'll be right behind you." She looked at him, fear and trust warring in her eyes. "You promise?" "I promise." He moved to the front door, rifle in one hand, pistol in the other. He took a deep breath, said a silent prayer to a God he was not sure he still believed in, and kicked the door open. Maylin ran. She burst out of the cabin and sprinted toward the trees, her bad leg screaming with every step, but her will stronger than the pain. Bullets kicked up snow around her feet. Men shouted. Jake came out right behind her, firing both weapons, not aiming, just creating noise and chaos and fear. One of Blackwood's men stepped into her path, rifle raised. Maylin did not hesitate. She raised the pistol Jake had given her and fired. The shot took the man in the chest. He went down, shock and pain on his face. She kept running. Jake saw it happen and felt a fierce pride. She was not a victim anymore. She was a fighter. They reached the trees and plunged into the forest. Behind them, the cabin and barn were both burning now, the flames reaching toward the gray sky. Blackwood's men were pursuing, but cautiously aware that the old rancher had teeth. "Keep moving," Jake gasped. "Don't stop." They ran through the snow, through the trees, their breath coming in ragged gasps. Jake's lungs burned with the cold and the exertion. Maylin was limping badly now, but she did not slow down. Behind them, they could hear the men crashing through the underbrush, shouting to each other, trying to coordinate their pursuit. Jake led them deeper into the forest, using every trick he knew. They crossed a frozen stream to break their trail. They doubled back twice, confusing the tracks. They climbed over a rocky outcropping where the snow had not settled, leaving no footprints. Slowly, gradually, the sounds of pursuit faded. They stopped in a small hollow surrounded by thick pines. Jake helped Maylin sit down on a fallen log. She was shaking with exhaustion and pain and delayed shock. "You shot that man," Jake said, his voice low. She looked up at him, her eyes wide. "I killed him." "Probably. You hit him center mass." She was silent for a long moment. Then she said very softly, "I am not sorry. He would have killed us." "I know. You did what you had to do. Is that what you tell yourself when you kill?" "Yes. And sometimes it's even true." They sat in the cold and the silence. Two people who had crossed a line there was no coming back from. The ranch was gone. They were fugitives now, running for their lives. But they were alive, and they were together, and for the moment that had to be enough. "We need to keep moving," Jake said, finally. "They'll find our trail eventually. We need to put distance between us and them. Where we go, Helena, it's 15 miles southeast. If we keep a good pace, we can make it by nightfall. Find Sheriff Wilson. Get you under official protection." Maylin stood wincing. "Then we go." They set off again, moving more carefully, now conserving their strength. The morning was fully light now, the sky clear and cold. The smoke from the burning ranch rose behind them like a funeral pyre. Everything Jake had built over 20 years was gone. The cabin where Sarah and Emma had lived, the barn he had raised with his own hands, the corrals, the fences, the life he had tried to preserve as a memorial to his lost family. All of it reduced to ash and memory. But as he walked through the snow with Maylin beside him, he realized something that surprised him. He did not feel the grief he expected. Instead, he felt something like relief. That ranch had been a tomb, a place where he had buried himself alive. Maybe losing it was not a tragedy. Maybe it was liberation. "You are quiet," Maylin said, "just thinking. About your home, about how it wasn't really a home anymore, not for a long time. Just a place I existed, a place I hid from the world. And now I'm back in the world, for better or worse." They walked on. Around midday they stopped to rest and eat. Jake had grabbed some jerky and hardtack from the cabin before they fled. It was not much, but it was food. They ate quickly, not wanting to linger. As they were preparing to move again, they heard it, the sound of a horse moving slowly through the trees. Just one horse. Jake motioned for Maylin to get down behind a fallen log. He raised his rifle, sighting toward the sound. A rider emerged from the trees, a large man, broad-shouldered and dark-skinned, wearing a heavy coat and a wide-brimmed hat. He was leading his horse rather than riding it, moving carefully through the snow. When he saw Jake, he stopped and slowly raised his hands. "Easy there, friend. I'm not looking for trouble." Jake kept the rifle trained on him. "Who are you?" "Name's Elijah Freeman. I run the smithy in Helena. I know you, Jake Thornton, though you might not remember me. I shoed your horses a few times years back before you went hermit on us." Jake studied him. Slowly, memory returned. A big man with gentle hands and a ready smile. A man who had been born into slavery and freed by the war. A man who had built a good life for himself through hard work and integrity. "I remember. What are you doing out here?" "I saw the smoke from your ranch this morning. Lot of smoke. I figured either you were burning slash or something bad had happened. Thought I'd ride out and check. And if something bad had happened," Elijah shrugged, "then maybe I could help. That's what neighbors do." Jake lowered the rifle slightly. "We're running from Clayton Blackwood and his men. They burned my ranch trying to get to us. To her." He gestured to Mei Lin, who stood up slowly from behind the log. Elijah's eyes went to Mei Lin, took in her bruised face, her exhausted posture, the determination in her eyes. Then he looked back at Jake. Blackwood. I've heard stories about that man. None of them good. He's into some dark business. He bought her 4 years ago, treated her like property. She escaped. I helped her. Now he wants her back and me dead. Elijah was quiet for a moment, his face thoughtful. Then he said, I was property once, long time ago, before the war. I know what that feels like, what it does to you. He looked at Mei Lin again. Nobody should be property, not ever. We're headed to Helena, Jake said, to find Sheriff Wilson. Wilson's a good man. He'll help if he can. But Blackwood's got connections, money, lawyers. I know, but it's our only shot. Elijah nodded slowly. Then let me give you a better shot. My horse is fresh. The young lady can ride. You walk beside. I'll come with you. 3 is safer than 2, and I know these woods better than most. Why would you do that? You don't know us. Elijah smiled, and it was a warm smile despite the cold. Like I said, I know what it's like to be property. I know what it's like to run, and I know what it's like when somebody helps you, even though they don't have to. Man named John Brown helped me once long time ago, got me north to freedom. I swore then that if I ever had the chance I'd pay that kindness forward. So here I am, paying it forward. Jake felt something loosen in his chest. They were not alone anymore. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We got a long walk ahead of us, and Blackwood's men are probably still looking. They set off together, Mei Lin riding Elijah's horse Jake and Elijah walking on either side. As they walked, Elijah talked, his deep voice steady and calm. I came to Montana in '72, he said, after the war. Worked the railroad for a while, then saved up enough to buy my smithy. Been in Helena 15 years now. Good town mostly. Good people. But there's darkness too. Men like Blackwood. They come west thinking they can be kings out here, thinking the law doesn't reach this far. Does it? Jake asked. Sometimes. Wilson's a good sheriff, but he's one man, and Blackwood's got money, which means he's got influence. Still, the law's the law, and there's enough good people in Helena that if they know what's happening, they'll stand up. You really believe that Elijah looked at him? I have to, otherwise, what's the point? We fought a war to end slavery. A lot of men died for that. If we let men like Blackwood bring it back under a different name, then they died for nothing. They walked in silence for a while. Then Mei Lin spoke her English, halting but clear. You were slave like me. Yes, ma'am. Born into it. Worked a tobacco plantation in Virginia. 30 years before I got free. How you escape I didn't. Not at first. The war came. The Union Army came through. I ran to them. They gave me a uniform and a rifle. I fought for 3 years. And when the war ended, I was free. Really free. You fight in war. Yes, ma'am. Fought at Petersburg, at Appomattox. Saw the elephant, as they used to say. Saw things I wish I could forget. Jake understood that. I was there too. Different side, but same hell. Elijah glanced at him. You fought for the Confederacy, I did. Not proud of it now. Didn't own slaves. Didn't believe in it. But I was young and stupid and thought I was defending my home. Took me years to understand what I was really defending. And now I'm trying to do better, make different choices. Elijah nodded. That's all any of us can do, make different choices, be better than we were. They walked on 3 people bound together by shared history and shared purpose. The sun was past its zenith now, beginning its slow descent toward the western horizon. The temperature was dropping again. They needed to reach Helena before dark. Behind them, unseen but persistent, Vernon Pike followed their trail. He was alone. The others had given up, gone back to report to Blackwood. But Vernon was a tracker, one of the best, and he had a score to settle with the old rancher who had humiliated them. He moved carefully, reading the signs. 3 sets of tracks now, 2 men walking 1 horse. They were heading toward Helena, just as Blackwood had predicted. Vernon smiled coldly. They thought they were running to safety. But Blackwood had plans for that too. The trap was already being set. They reached the outskirts of Helena as the sun touched the mountains to the west, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The town had grown since Jake had last paid it any real attention. New buildings lined the main street. A church with a proper steeple. A school. Signs of civilization pushing back against the wilderness. Elijah led them not to the main street, but through the back ways, the alleys and side paths that most visitors never saw. "We'll go to Doc Hartley first," he said. "Get the young lady looked at, then we'll find Wilson." "Doc Hartley?" Jake asked. "Sarah Hartley. Town doctor. Good woman. She'll help." They stopped behind a 2-story building with a sign that read Medical Practice S. Hartley, M.D. Elijah knocked on the back door. After a moment it opened, revealing a woman in her mid-40s with graying brown hair pulled back in a practical bun and sharp, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "Elijah Freeman," she said, her voice warm. "What brings you to my back door at this hour?" "Got some folks need help, Doc. Friends of mine." She looked past him to Jake and Mei Lin. Her expression changed instantly when she saw Mei Lin's bruised face and exhausted state. "Bring her in. Quickly." They went inside into a clean, well-lit examination room. Doc Hartley helped Mei Lin onto the examination table and began checking her over with practiced efficiency. She did not ask questions yet, just worked her hands gentle but thorough. "Who did this to you?" she finally asked. "Bad men." Mei Lin replied, her voice thin. "How long ago? Some bruises old, some new, many years of bad." Doc Hartley's jaw tightened. She looked at Jake. "You're Jake Thornton. I remember you. You brought your wife and daughter here during the fever. I couldn't save them. I'm sorry. Not your fault. Fever took a lot of people. Yes, it did." She returned her attention to Mei Lin. "What's your name, honey?" "Mei Lin. Mei Lin Chen." "Well, Mei Lin, you've been through hell. But you're safe now. I'm going to clean these wounds and bandage them properly. You'll stay here tonight. I have a room upstairs. Clean bed, warm food. You need rest." Mei Lin looked at Jake, uncertainty in her eyes. "It's safe here," Jake assured her. "Doc Hartley's a good person. You can trust her." Doc Hartley worked in silence for a while, cleaning and bandaging. Then she said, without looking up, "Clayton Blackwood." "Am I right?" Jake and Elijah exchanged glances. "How did you know?" "Because you're not the first person to show up at my door running from him. There was a Mexican girl last year, Irish woman before that. Always the same story. Bought and sold like cattle. Beaten. Abused. And when they try to escape, he hunts them down." "What happened to them?" Jake asked. "The Mexican girl made it to California. I helped her get on a wagon train. The Irish woman. She paused. He found her before we could get her out. Dragged her back. Nobody saw her again." Mei Lin's face went pale. "That will not happen to me. I will die first." "You won't have to die," Doc Hartley said firmly. "And you won't go back to him. Not if I have anything to say about it." There was a knock at the front door. Doc Hartley frowned. "I'm not expecting anyone. Stay here." She left the examination room. They heard voices. Doc Hartley's and a man's, deep and authoritative. Then she returned with a tall man in his early 50s wearing a sheriff's badge on his coat. He had iron-gray hair and a weathered face that spoke of years spent enforcing the law on the frontier. "Jake Thornton," the man said, his voice a mix of surprise and concern. "Didn't expect to see you in Helena. Heard your ranch burned today." Jake stood. "Dan Wilson. Been a long time. 5 years. You stopped coming to town. Stopped talking to anyone. Became a ghost. Had my reasons." Wilson looked at Mei Lin, at her bruised face and bandaged arms. "Those reasons got anything to do with Clayton Blackwood, everything to do with him." Wilson pulled up a chair and sat down heavily. "Tell me everything. Don't leave anything out." So Jake told him. About finding Mei Lin in the snow, about Blackwood's claim that she was his property, about the attack on his ranch that morning, about running through the forest and meeting Elijah, all of it in clear, straightforward detail. When he finished, Wilson paused, considering. Then he said, "Blackwood's going to say, she's a runaway worker, that he has legal papers, debt bondage, he'll call it. Not slavery, just a work contract. It's slavery, Elijah said flatly. Call it what you want, but that's what it is. I agree, Wilson said. But the law's complicated. These contracts exist in a gray area. And Blackwood's got a lawyer, Marcus Hayes. Slick bastard who knows how to twist the law to his advantage. So you can't help us. Jake's voice was tight with frustration. I didn't say that, Wilson leaned forward. I said it's complicated. But there are ways. First, Mei Lin is under my protection as of right now. Anyone tries to take her by force, they'll answer to me. Second, we need evidence. Testimony from other victims. Documentation of abuse. Proof that Blackwood's operation is more than just legal debt collection. I can testify, Mei Lin said, barely above a whisper. I can tell what he did, what he do to others. That's a start. But we'll need more. We need to build a case strong enough that the territorial court will listen. There was another knock at the door. This time it was a man in his 50s wearing a clerical collar. He was thin and ascetic-looking with kind eyes. Pastor Benjamin Cross Doc Hartley introduced him. He works with immigrants and displaced people in Helena. If anyone knows about Blackwood's victims, it's him. Pastor Cross listened to the story with growing anger. I've suspected for years, he said when Jake finished. But people are afraid to talk. Blackwood has power, money. He makes examples of people who cross him. Can you get people to testify? Wilson asked. Maybe. If they believe they'll be protected, if they think there's a real chance of justice. I'll protect them, Wilson said. You have my word. Then I'll try. There's a Chinese community here, about 30 people. They know things. And there's others. Irish, Mexican, German. Blackwood doesn't discriminate in who he exploits. The door opened again, and a woman in her late 40s entered, her face flushed from hurrying. She wore a simple but well-made dress and had the air of someone used to running things efficiently. Ruth Wilson said, standing, "What are you doing here? I heard about the fire at Silver Creek Ranch. Heard Jake Thornton was in town. Thought I'd come see if I could help." She looked at Mei Lin with immediate sympathy. "Oh, you poor dear. What have they done to you?" Ruth Wilson, Doc Hartley said. "Sheriff's wife. Runs the boarding house on 3rd Street. Mei Lin can stay with me," Ruth said immediately. "I've got a room. Private. Safe." She looked at her husband. "Unless you think that's not wise," Wilson considered. "Actually, that might be better. Doc's place is known. Blackwood will think to look here. Your boarding house, he'd never expect it. And you've got old Tom living there. He's ex-Army. Good man in a fight, if it comes to that." "Then it's settled," Ruth said. She came to Mei Lin and took her hand gently. "Come with me, dear. Let's get you cleaned up and fed and into a proper bed." Mei Lin looked at Jake. "You will be close. I'll be right there. I'll sleep in the hallway outside your door if I have to." Ruth smiled. "That won't be necessary. We have a room for you too, Mr. Thornton, right across the hall. You can keep an eye on her all you want." As Ruth led Mei Lin out, Wilson turned to Jake and Elijah. "We need to move fast. Blackwood will come to town, probably tomorrow. He'll want to file legal papers, make this a civil matter instead of criminal. Once he does that, it gets harder for me to intervene." "What do you need from us?" Jake asked. "Evidence, witnesses, anything that proves what he's really doing." "Pastor, you work on getting people to talk. Elijah, you've got contacts in the community. Use them. Jake, you stay close to Mei Lin. Keep her safe. And all of you be careful. Blackwood's dangerous. He's got men willing to kill for him." They agreed and dispersed into the growing darkness. Jake and Elijah walked to Ruth's boarding house, a 3-story building with warm lights glowing in the windows. Ruth showed them to their rooms, simple but clean and comfortable. After she left, Jake stood at his window looking out at the darkened street. Somewhere out there, Blackwood was planning his next move, and Jake knew that the fight was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Across the hall, Mei Lin sat on her bed clean for the first time in weeks, wearing a borrowed nightgown that Ruth had given her. She looked around the room at the simple furniture, the quilt on the bed, the lamp on the bedside table. It was more comfort than she had known in 4 years. There was a soft knock on the door. "Come in." Jake entered, his hat in his hands. "Just wanted to make sure you're settled." "I am. Thank you for everything." "You don't need to keep thanking me." "Yes, I do." She looked at him steadily. "You gave up your home for me. Everything you had. That home was a prison. You set me free from it just as much as I helped free you. Still, it was sacrifice." Jake sat down in the chair by the door. "When Sarah and Emma died, I thought my life was over. I thought the only thing left was to wait for death. But then I found you, and I realized I still had something to fight for, something to live for. So, if anyone's grateful here, it's me." Maylin's eyes filled with tears. "You are a good man, Jake Thornton. Best man I know. I'm just a man trying to do better than he did before." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Maylin said, "Tomorrow will be hard, yes, yes. Blackwood will come. He'll bring lawyers and maybe more men. It's going to be a fight. I am ready to fight. I know you are. Jake, if something happened to me, if he take me back, promise me you will not blame yourself. Promise me you will live. Really live. Not like before. Not like Ghost. Nothing's going to happen to you. I won't let it. Promise me anyway." He held her gaze. Then he said, "I promise. But you have to promise me something too." "What?" "That you'll never stop fighting. No matter what happens, you'll never give up. I promise." "Good. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow we start building our case, and we're going to win." "How you know?" "Because we have something Blackwood doesn't." "What is that?" "The truth. And people who are willing to fight for it." Maylin smiled through her tears. "Then we will win." Jake left her to sleep and returned to his room. But he did not sleep. He sat in the chair by the window rifle across his knees, watching the street below. Keeping watch. Keeping guard. Across town, in the finest hotel Helena had to offer, Clayton Blackwood sat at a table with his lawyer, Marcus Hayes. Vernon Pike stood by the door, his shoulder bandaged, his face hard. Tomorrow morning, Blackwood said, we file papers, theft of property, harboring a fugitive, criminal interference with a legal contract. I want that old man arrested and the girl returned to me. Hayes nodded, making notes. The law's on our side. Debt bondage is legal in the territories. I've got the original contract. Everything's in order. What about Wilson? Vernon asked. He's not going to just hand her over. Wilson's a lawman, Hayes said. He'll have to follow the law, and the law says she's your property until her debt is paid. Blackwood's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile, more a baring of teeth. Good, because I want her back. And I want Thornton to watch when I punish her. I want him to see what his heroism cost her. Then I'll deal with him. How Vernon asked. An accident. A robbery gone wrong. This is the frontier. People die all the time. Nobody will question it. They sat in the lamplight planning their next moves, confident in their power and their righteousness. They did not know that outside in the shadows, Pastor Cross was meeting with a young Chinese man named Tommy Chen, who worked in the hotel's laundry. And Tommy was telling the pastor everything he had heard through the thin walls. The battle lines were being drawn, and tomorrow the real fight would begin. Morning came to Helena with a biting wind that rattled windows and sent swirls of snow dancing down the main street. Jake had not slept. He had kept his vigil through the night, waiting the rifle never far from his hand. When the first gray light of dawn began to seep through the curtains, he stood and stretched, feeling every year of his age in his stiff joints and aching back. There was a soft knock at his door. He opened it to find Ruth standing there with a tray. "Coffee and breakfast," she said quietly. "Thought you might need it. Thank you." "How is she sleeping?" Finally, she was restless most of the night. Ruth nodded. "I'll check on her in a bit. Let her rest as long as she can. Today's going to be hard. I know." Ruth hesitated, then said, "My husband is a good man, Mr. Thornton. But he's also a lawman. If Blackwood has legal papers, Dan will have to acknowledge them, at least initially. Don't let that discourage you." "I won't." "Good. Because there are more people on your side than you might think. This town has a long memory. We know what Blackwood is. We've just been waiting for someone brave enough to stand against him." She left him with the tray, and Jake ate mechanically, barely tasting the food. His mind was already on the day ahead, the confrontation that was coming. He checked his rifle, his pistol, made sure both were clean and loaded. Then he sat down to wait. Across the hall, Mei Lin woke to sunlight streaming through the window. For a moment, she did not know where she was. Then memory returned. The boarding house. Safety. Jake across the hall. She sat up carefully, testing her leg. It still hurt, but less than before. The rest and Doc Hartley's treatment had helped. There was a basin of warm water on the dresser, a clean towel beside it. Ruth must have brought it while she slept. Mei Lin washed her face and hands, then dressed in the simple gray dress that Ruth had provided. It fit reasonably well. She looked at herself in the small mirror on the wall. The bruises were fading from black to purple to yellow. Her split lip was healing. She looked less like a victim and more like a survivor. There was a knock at her door. "Come in." Jake entered, and she saw the relief in his eyes when he saw her up and dressed. "How are you feeling? Better? Stronger?" "Good." "Because Wilson sent word. Blackwood's filing papers this morning at the courthouse. We need to be there. I am ready." "Mei Lin, what we're about to do, it won't be easy. Blackwood will say terrible things. His lawyer will try to make you seem like you're the one in the wrong. Can you handle that?" She met his eyes steadily. "For 4 years I handled much worse. I can handle words." "All right then, let's go." They met Elijah and Pastor Cross downstairs. The pastor looked exhausted, as if he had not slept either. But there was a light in his eyes, a determination that had not been there the day before. "I have news," he said in a hushed tone. "Tommy Chen, a young man who works at the hotel, he overheard Blackwood talking last night. Blackwood's planning to have you kill Jake, make it look like an accident. After he gets Mei Lin back." Jake's expression did not change. "I expected as much. There's more. Tommy knows of 3 other women who escaped from Blackwood over the years. One is in Oregon now, one in California, but one a woman named Maria Gonzalez. She's still here in Montana, living in a mining camp near Butte. She's willing to testify if we can protect her." "Can we get her here?" Wilson asked, appearing in the doorway. "I sent Tommy on the morning stage. He'll be back with her in 3 days." 3 days. Wilson rubbed his jaw. "All right. I can stall that long, but it won't be easy. Blackwood's lawyer is good." "We have something else," Elijah said. He held up a leather-bound ledger. "I did some asking around last night. Turns out Blackwood keeps detailed records of all his workers. Names, purchase prices, debts owed. This ledger belonged to one of his foremen who got drunk and talkative. It's evidence of a whole network, not just Mei Lin. Dozens of people." Wilson took the ledger and flipped through it. His face grew darker with each page. "Jesus Christ. He's been doing this for years. This is slavery, pure and simple." "Will it help?" Jake asked. "It'll help. But we need more. We need Mei Lin's testimony. We need the other victims, and we need to prove that his contracts are fraudulent, that these people were coerced, not willing participants." "I was willing participant," Mei Lin said bitterly. "Willing to not be killed." "Exactly," Wilson said. "That's coercion. But we need to prove it in a way that will hold up in territorial court." They walked together through the cold morning to the courthouse, a 2-story building of brick and timber at the center of town. A crowd had already gathered. Word had spread fast. The town was coming to watch. Inside the courtroom was filling up. Miners and ranchers, shopkeepers and their wives, the Chinese laborers from the rail camps, the Irish and Mexican workers who had come west looking for opportunities and found only hardship. They filled the benches' standing room, only their faces a mix of curiosity and anger and hope. At the front of the room, behind a table on the right side, sat Clayton Blackwood. He wore a fine suit, his hair pomaded, his beard trimmed. He looked respectable, civilized. Next to him sat Marcus Hayes, his lawyer, a thin man with cold eyes and a predatory smile. Behind them stood Vernon Pike and 2 other men, all armed. On the left side, Sheriff Wilson sat at another table. Jake and Mei Lin sat beside him. Elijah and Pastor Cross took seats directly behind them in the first row of the public gallery. The territorial judge, a man named Silas Bradford, entered from a side door. He was in his 60s, white-haired, and stern-faced. Everyone rose. Bradford took his seat at the high bench and gestured for everyone to sit. "We're here on a petition filed by Mr. Clayton Blackwood," Bradford said, his voice carrying through the room. "Mr. Blackwood claims that Miss Mei-Lin Chen is bound to him by a legal work contract and that she has fled that contract unlawfully. He further claims that Mr. Jacob Thornton has harbored Miss Chen in violation of the law and is therefore liable for damages. Mr. Hayes, you may proceed." Hayes stood smoothing his jacket. "Thank you, Your Honor. This is a simple case. My client, Mr. Blackwood, is a legitimate businessman who operates several enterprises in Montana Territory. 4 years ago, he purchased the work contract of Miss Chen from her previous employer in San Francisco for the sum of $500. The contract stipulated that Miss Chen would work for Mr. Blackwood for a period of 7 years to repay this debt plus interest and living expenses. He produced a sheaf of papers and handed them to the judge. Here is the original contract signed by Miss Chen's guardian after her father's death. Here are the receipts showing payment. Here are the accounting ledgers showing her debt balance. Everything is legal and proper." Bradford examined the papers carefully. "Miss Chen, did you sign this contract?" Mei-Lin stood, her voice steady, despite her fear. "No, I never signed. My father was killed. These men, they tell me I owe them money. I say no. They say they will kill me too. So She struggled for the word, "I agree. But I never signed paper." Hayes smiled thinly. "Your Honor, the contract was signed by her legal guardian, as was proper since Miss Chen was a single woman without family. Whether she personally signed is irrelevant." "Who was this guardian?" Bradford asked. "A Mr. Chen Wei, who operated the boarding house where Miss Chen lived after her father's death. He had legal authority over her." "Where is this Mr. Chen Wei now?" Bradford asked. "Deceased, Your Honor. He died 2 years ago." "How convenient," Wilson muttered. Bradford ignored the comment. "What is your response to this?" Sheriff Wilson stood. "Your Honor, the contract may have legal trappings, but it's still slavery under a different name. Miss Chen was coerced. She was threatened with death. She's been held against her will for 4 years. She's been beaten, abused, and treated as property. The contract is fraudulent." "That's a serious accusation," Bradford said. "Do you have evidence?" "I have Miss Chen's testimony. I have this ledger which shows that Mr. Blackwood has similar contracts with dozens of other people, all of them immigrants, all of them vulnerable. And I have witnesses who will testify to the pattern of abuse." "Hearsay and speculation," Hayes said dismissively. "The contract is legal. Miss Chen owes a debt. She must fulfill her obligations. She owes nothing to a man who beat her and treated her like an animal." Wilson shot back. "Order," Bradford said, rapping his gavel. "I will hear testimony." Miss Chen approached the bench. Mei-Lin walked forward, her head high, despite the trembling in her legs. Jake wanted to go with her, but Wilson put a hand on his arm. "Let her do this." Bradford looked down at her from the bench. "Miss Chen, in your own words, tell me what happened." Mei-Lin took a deep breath. "In 1879, my father died in San Francisco. Men kill him because he owe money. My mother died same day. Her heart break. I am alone. These men, they say I owe my father's debt. I say no, I do not owe. They say I owe, or they kill me too." She paused, gathering her courage. "They sell me to Mr. Blackwood for $500. He take me to Montana. He say I work for him 7 years. But he never say what work. He make me cook, clean, wash. He beat me when I too slow. He beat me when I talk. He beat me for nothing. For fun. That's a lie." Blackwood stood, his face red. "Your Honor, this woman is a liar and a thief. I provided her food, shelter, clothing. I treated her well. She repays me by running away." "Mr. Blackwood, sit down," Bradford ordered. Miss Chen, continue. "I tried to run away 3 times. Mei-Lin said, her voice stronger now. "First time they catch me. They beat me so bad I cannot walk for 1 week. Second time they break my arm, see?" She held up her left arm, showing how it sat at a wrong angle. "Never heal right. Third time Mr. Blackwood say, he will kill me, make example. So I run again, in snow, in cold. I think maybe I die. Better to die free than live as slave." The courtroom was absolutely silent. Every eye was on her. "That is when Mr. Thornton find me. He save my life. He give me food, warm safety. He ask nothing from me. He just help because it is right thing to do, and now Mr. Blackwood want me back so he can kill me." Blackwood was on his feet again. "Your Honor, I have never threatened to kill this woman. This is all lies designed to escape her legal obligations." "Mr. Hayes, control your client," Bradford said. Hayes pulled Blackwood back into his seat, whispering urgently in his ear. Bradford turned back to Mei Lin. "Miss Chen, do you have any proof of these allegations? Anyone who witnessed the abuse?" "Yes," Mei Lin said. "Others, other women, other men, all work for Mr. Blackwood, all treated same. Some dead now, some run away, some still there too afraid to leave. Names?" Hayes demanded. "Give us names if you're telling the truth." Mei Lin looked at Pastor Cross, who nodded encouragingly. "Maria Gonzalez, Mexican woman. She escaped last year. She is in Butte now. She will tell you same story as me. And there is Irish woman named Catherine O'Brien. She die. Mr. Blackwood beat her so bad she die. He bury her in forest. Nobody ever find her." "Another lie," Blackwood shouted. "Catherine O'Brien completed her contract and left my employment. I have no idea where she is now." "Then why you have her name in your book?" Mei Lin pointed at the ledger Elijah had provided. "Why it say she owe you money if she complete contract?" Hayes moved quickly to object. "Your Honor, that ledger was obtained illegally. It should not be admitted as evidence." Sheriff Wilson Bradford asked, "How did you obtain this ledger?" "It was given to me by a concerned citizen," Wilson said carefully. "Someone who felt the public had a right to know what was happening." "That's theft," Hayes protested. "That's evidence of a crime," Wilson countered. "And I'm duty-bound to investigate crimes." Bradford held up his hand for silence. "I'm going to take a recess. I need to examine these documents more carefully. We'll reconvene in 2 hours." He stood, and everyone in the courtroom rose as he left. The moment he was gone, the room erupted in conversation. People surged forward, some to congratulate Mei Lin, others to confront Blackwood. Wilson's deputies moved quickly to maintain order, creating a barrier between the two sides. Jake reached Mei Lin first, pulling her back toward safety. "You did well. You were brave. I was so scared. I know. But you didn't let it stop you." Blackwood pushed through the crowd, Vernon and his men flanking him. He stopped a few feet from Mei Lin, his eyes full of cold fury. "You're going to regret this," he said quietly. "All of you. I'll make sure of it." "Is that a threat?" Mr. Blackwood Wilson asked, stepping between them. "It's a promise, Sheriff. I know people. Important people, people who can make your life very difficult. Then they'll have to get in line," Wilson said. "Because right now you're the one in trouble." Blackwood sneered and pushed past them, his men following. They left the courthouse, and Jake saw Vernon look back, once his eyes finding Jake's. There was a message in that look. This isn't over. Outside, the cold wind had picked up, carrying the smell of snow. Pastor Cross pulled Jake aside. "We have 2 hours. I'm going to gather more witnesses, people who are willing to speak." "Elijah, can you help already on it?" Elijah said. They dispersed, leaving Jake and Mei Lin standing on the courthouse steps. She was shivering, though whether from cold or delayed reaction, Jake could not tell. He put his arm around her shoulders, a gesture of protection and comfort. "You should be proud," he said. "You stood up to him. You told the truth. But will it be enough? I don't know. But whatever happens, we're in this together." They walked back to the boarding house, Ruth meeting them at the door. Come in. I've got hot soup and bread. You both look like you need it." In the warm kitchen, over bowls of Ruth's chicken soup, they sat in silence for a while. Then Mei Lin said, "Jake, if judge say I must go back, will you let them take me?" He looked at her for a long moment. "No, but the law. The law can be wrong. I've learned that the hard way. If Bradford rules against you, we'll run. Head west to California or north to Canada, wherever we need to go. You would do that. Become outlaw for you, yes, because what's right is more important than what's legal." She reached across the table and took his hand. "I am lucky to have you. We're lucky to have each other." Ruth watched them from across the kitchen, a small smile on her face. Then she said, "You know there's another option." "What's that?" Jake asked. "Fight. Not with guns. With the people. This town is full of folks who hate what Blackwood represents. They've just been afraid to stand up, but if they see someone else standing, they might find their courage." "How do we do that?" Ruth poured more coffee. "You gather them. You tell them what's at stake. You ask them to stand with you when Bradford reconvenes. Show the judge that this isn't just about one contract or one woman. It's about what kind of place we want Helena to be." "You think they'll come?" Ruth smiled. "Mr. Thornton, you'd be surprised what people will do when they're given a chance to do the right thing." The word spread through Helena like wildfire. Pastor Cross walked the streets, speaking to everyone he met. Elijah worked the smithies and workshops, the saloons and boarding houses. Ruth Wilson visited the homes of the women she knew, the wives and mothers and daughters who had their own stories of hardship and survival. By the time the courthouse bells rang to signal the end of the recess, a crowd had gathered. Not just the curious onlookers from before, but people who had made a choice. The Chinese workers from the rail camp, dressed in their simple work clothes, standing silent and dignified. The Irish families from the mining district, mothers with babies on their hips and older children clinging to their skirts. Mexican laborers who had come north looking for work and found only exploitation. German immigrants who had fled one kind of tyranny only to find another waiting here. And standing with them, the established citizens of Helena. Doc Hartley in her practical dress, Elijah Freeman, tall and imposing, Ruth Wilson, and a dozen other women from the church, shop owners who had prospered in Helena and knew that prosperity built on slavery was no prosperity at all. Old soldiers who had fought in the war and knew what they had been fighting for. More than 100 people filling the courthouse and spilling out onto the steps and into the street. Jake and Mei Lin walked through the crowd, and hands reached out to touch them, to offer words of encouragement. "We're with you. You're not alone. Stand strong." Inside the courtroom, Judge Bradford had returned to the bench. He looked out at the packed room, his expression unreadable. Then he rapped his gavel. "Order. I will have order." The crowd quieted, but they did not leave. They stood shoulder to shoulder, a wall of humanity bearing witness. "I have reviewed the documents," Bradford began. "I have examined the contract between Mr. Blackwood and Miss Chen. I have read through the ledger provided by Sheriff Wilson, and I have considered the testimony I've heard this morning." The room held its breath. The contract on its face appears to be legal. Debt bondage, while morally questionable, is not explicitly prohibited in Montana territory. However, he paused, holding up the ledger, this document tells a different story. It shows a pattern of abuse, of contracts that are never fulfilled because the debt keeps growing through arbitrary charges, of people who are trapped in a system designed to exploit them indefinitely. Blackwood shifted in his seat, his confidence wavering. Furthermore, Bradford continued, Miss Chen's testimony is compelling and credible. She has accused Mr. Blackwood of assault, false imprisonment, and coercion. These are serious criminal charges that cannot be dismissed simply because a piece of paper says she owes money. Your Honor, Hayes stood quickly. You cannot disregard a legal contract based on uncorroborated accusations. I'm not disregarding the contract, Mr. Hayes. I'm questioning its validity. And I'm exercising my authority to order a full investigation into Mr. Blackwood's business practices. He looked at Wilson. Sheriff, you are hereby authorized to investigate all allegations of abuse, coercion, and unlawful imprisonment. You will interview all of Mr. Blackwood's current and former workers. You will examine his records, and you will report back to this court within 30 days. Your Honor. This is outrageous, Hayes protested. What's outrageous? Mr. Hayes, is the possibility that slavery is being practiced in my jurisdiction under the guise of legitimate business. I will not tolerate it. The gavel came down hard. As for Miss Chen, Bradford turned to Mei Lin, you are hereby released from Mr. Blackwood's custody pending the outcome of the investigation. You will remain under Sheriff Wilson's protection. Mr. Blackwood, you are ordered to stay away from Miss Chen. If you or your agents approach her, you will be arrested. Am I clear? Blackwood's face was purple with rage. Your Honor, you cannot do this. I have rights. I have invested money. This is theft, Mr. Blackwood. One more outburst, and I will hold you in contempt. Sit down. Blackwood sat, but his eyes burned with hatred as he stared at Mei Lin. Bradford continued. I am also ordering Mr. Blackwood to provide a full accounting of all his business dealings to this court. Every contract, every worker, every transaction. You have 2 weeks. Failure to comply will result in immediate arrest. The courtroom erupted in applause. People cheered, cried, embraced each other. Jake felt Mei Lin sag against him, relief overwhelming her. He held her up. His own eyes, stinging with emotion, he thought he had forgotten how to feel. Order, Bradford shouted over the noise. Order. When the room quieted, he said, I want to be clear. This is not a final ruling. This is the beginning of a process. Justice takes time, but it will be done. Now this court is adjourned. As people filed out celebrating and congratulating each other, Blackwood pushed through the crowd toward the door. Vernon and his men surrounded him, creating a barrier. As he passed Jake and Mei Lin, he stopped. This isn't over, he hissed. You think you've won? You've won nothing. I have lawyers in Denver. I have friends in Washington. I'll appeal this all the way to the Supreme Court if I have to. And in the meantime, accidents happen. People disappear, remember that. Is that another threat? Mr. Blackwood Wilson was suddenly there, his hand on his gun. It's a fact of life, Sheriff. The frontier is a dangerous place. Then I suggest you be extra careful, Wilson said, because if anything happens to Miss Chen, or Mr. Thornton, or anyone else connected to this case, you'll be the first person I come looking for. A mirthless expression crossed Blackwood's face, his eyes remaining dead and flat. You can't watch them forever. He left his men following, but the threat hung in the air, poisoning the victory. Outside, the crowd had turned into an impromptu celebration. Someone had brought out a fiddle, someone else had a harmonica. Music filled the air and people were dancing in the street despite the cold. Children ran and played. Women hugged each other and cried happy tears. Pastor Cross approached Jake and Mei Lin, his face beaming. You did it. You stood up, and the whole town stood with you. We haven't won yet, Jake cautioned. Blackwood's right. This is just the beginning. Maybe so, but it's a beginning. That's more than we had yesterday. Elijah joined them, a wide grin on his face. I've got news. Tommy Chen found Maria Gonzalez. She's on her way here. Should arrive day after tomorrow. And there's more. 3 other women have come forward already. Word spread fast. They want to testify. That's good, Wilson said, approaching the group. The more evidence we have, the stronger our case. But we need to be careful, Jake said. Blackwood's desperate now. Desperate men do dangerous things. I'll assign deputies to watch the boarding house, Wilson promised. And I'll make sure Mei Lin is never alone. Mei Lin spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. I do not want to hide. I want to help. I want to talk to other women. Tell them it is safe to speak now. That's brave of you, Ruth said, joining the conversation. And it might make a real difference. Sometimes all people need is to see someone else being brave first. They spent the rest of the day in a whirlwind of activity. Mei Lin, accompanied by Jake and Ruth, visited the Chinese community. In a small room above a laundry, she spoke to 6 women who had worked for Blackwood, or men like him. She told them her story. She showed them her scars. She promised them that if they testified, they would be protected. One by one they agreed. By evening, they had 12 witnesses, 12 people willing to stand up and tell the truth about what had been done to them. As the sun set and the temperature dropped, Jake and Mei Lin returned to the boarding house. They were exhausted, but hopeful. Ruth made them dinner, a hearty stew with fresh bread. They ate at the kitchen table, joined by Elijah and Pastor Cross and Wilson. "Today was a good day," Wilson said, raising his coffee cup, "to justice and to courage." They all raised their cups, echoing the toast. But as they sat there in the warm kitchen, none of them saw the figure watching from across the street. Vernon Pike stood in the shadows, his eyes on the boarding house, his mind working through the problem Blackwood had given him. Make them pay. That's what Blackwood had said. I don't care how. Just make them pay. Vernon was good at making people pay. He had been doing it for 20 years, ever since the war had broken him and turned him into something cold and efficient. He did not enjoy the work, but he did it well, and he always delivered. He watched until the lights in the boarding house went out one by one. Then he slipped away into the darkness to make his plans. That night Jake did not sleep in the boarding house. He told Mei Lin he was going to check on something, but the truth was he needed to think, to walk, to clear his head. He took his rifle and walked the streets of Helena, the cold biting at his face, his breath making clouds in the freezing air. He found himself at the cemetery on the edge of town. He had not been here in 5 years, but his feet remembered the way. He walked between the headstones until he found the ones he was looking for. Sarah Thornton, beloved wife. Emma Thornton, beloved daughter. The graves were well tended. Someone had been maintaining them. Probably Ruth or Pastor Cross or one of the other good people of Helena who remembered his family and honored them even after he had abandoned the town. Jake knelt in the snow before the headstones. Sarah, Emma, I'm sorry I stayed away so long. I'm sorry I let my grief turn me into a ghost. But I think maybe I'm finding my way back to the living. The wind whispered through the cemetery, and in it, Jake imagined he heard Sarah's voice. About time, Jacob Thornton. About damn time. He smiled despite the tears on his cheeks. I found someone, Sarah, not to replace you. Nobody could replace you, but someone who needs help, someone who's given me a reason to fight again. I think you'd like her. She's strong, brave, doesn't let the world break her. The wind died down, and the cemetery was silent except for the distant sound of a dog barking somewhere in town. I'm going to protect her, Sarah, whatever it takes, even if it means dying. Because I understand now what you were trying to teach me, that life is about more than just surviving. It's about standing up for what's right, about fighting for people who can't fight for themselves. He stood brushing the snow from his knees. I love you, both of you. Always will. But I'm going to live now, really live, the way you wanted me to. He turned and walked back toward town, his step lighter than it had been in years. Behind him, in the darkness, he did not see Vernon Pike step out from behind a large monument. Vernon had followed him, planning to kill him quietly in the cemetery where nobody would hear. But as he listened to Jake talking to his dead wife, something had stopped him. Vernon stood there for a long time, looking at the graves, thinking about his own ghosts, the men he had killed, the things he had done, the person he had been before the war broke him. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Jake alive. For now. The morning after the courthouse hearing brought news that shook the town. During the previous night while Helena slept, one of Blackwood's warehouses had burned to the ground, not the one where he kept his supplies, but the one where he kept his records. All his files, all his contracts, all his ledgers, everything that was not already in the hands of Sheriff Wilson had gone up in flames. Blackwood claimed it was an accident. A stove left unattended, but nobody in Helena believed that. It was too convenient, too timely. Wilson was furious. Those records were evidence. Now we only have what we already seized. Everything else is gone. But we still have witnesses, Pastor Cross pointed out. We still have the women who are willing to testify." "Blackwood knows that," Jake said grimly. "He's not done yet. This was just him covering his tracks. Next, he'll try to silence the witnesses." Wilson nodded grimly. "Then we protect them, all of them, around the clock." He assigned deputies to guard the women who had agreed to testify. He posted men at the boarding house where Maylin stayed. He put the word out that anyone who threatened a witness would face immediate arrest. But Helena was a big town, and Wilson had only 6 deputies. He could not be everywhere at once. On the 3rd day after the hearing, Maria Gonzalez arrived. She was a small woman in her 30s with hard eyes and a scar that ran from her temple to her jaw. She looked at Maylin and saw a kindred spirit. "You are the one who stood up to him." "Yes," Maylin said. "Good. I will stand with you. He took 2 years of my life. He killed my brother when he tried to help me escape. I will make him pay." The 2 women embraced 2 survivors bound by shared trauma and shared determination. That evening, Wilson called a meeting at the courthouse. All the witnesses were there. All the people who had agreed to help. The room was full of nervous energy and quiet courage. "I won't lie to you," Wilson said, standing before them. "The next few weeks are going to be dangerous. Blackwood will try to intimidate you. He'll try to buy you off. He might try worse. But if you stand strong, if you stand together, we can beat him. We can make sure he never hurts anyone again." One of the Chinese women raised her hand tentatively. "What happened after trial? Where we go?" "That's a good question," Wilson said. "Pastor Cross." The pastor stood. "We're working with churches and charitable organizations across the territory. We'll help you find work with real pay. We'll help you find homes. We'll help you start new lives. You won't be abandoned." Another woman, Irish with red hair and a face weathered by hardship, asked, "What if he kills us? What if he wins?" "Then we fight," Elijah said, standing. "I was a slave for 30 years. I know what it's like to think you have no power. But you do. You have the power of truth. You have the power of your voice. And you have us, all of us, standing with you." The room was silent for a moment. Then Maria stood. "I will testify. I am not afraid of him anymore." One by one the others stood. "I will testify. I will stand. I will fight. All except one." A young Mexican man who had been quiet throughout the meeting stood and said, "I am sorry. I cannot. I have family, children. If something happens to me, they have nobody. I am sorry." He left quickly, shame and fear warring on his face. Nobody blamed him. They understood. Fear was a powerful thing. As the meeting broke up, Jake pulled Wilson aside. "We need to be ready for the worst. Blackwood's not going to sit back and let this happen. I know. I've got men watching his hotel, watching his warehouses. But he is smart. He'll find a way. Then we need to be smarter." They walked out of the courthouse together into the cold night. The streets were quiet. Too quiet. Jake felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Something was wrong. "Get everyone back inside," he said to Wilson. What now? Jake's shout was drowned out by the crack of a rifle shot. The bullet hit the courthouse wall 2 inches from Wilson's head, spraying them with stone fragments. People screamed. Another shot. Then another. "Ambush," Jake shouted, pushing people back into the courthouse. "Get down! Get inside!" The shots were coming from the roof of the hotel across the street. Jake could see the muzzle flashes in the darkness. He raised his own rifle and fired back, working the lever, firing again and again, trying to keep the shooter's head down while people scrambled for cover. Wilson was shouting orders to his deputies. "Return fire. Suppress that shooter. Get people to safety." Maylin was frozen in the doorway, terror on her face. Jake ran to her, grabbed her, and pulled her inside, just as another bullet shattered the window behind her. He pushed her to the floor, covering her body with his own. "Are you hit?" No, I am okay. Stay down. Don't move." Outside, the gunfight continued. The shooter on the hotel roof had been joined by others, 3, maybe 4 men firing down into the street. Wilson's deputies were firing back from cover, but they were outgunned. Then, from unexpected quarters, help arrived. Elijah appeared with a rifle firing with deadly accuracy. 2 miners joined him, then a shopkeeper, then an old soldier. The citizens of Helena, armed and angry, began to fight back. The tide turned quickly. The shooters on the roof, faced with more resistance than they had expected, began to retreat. One of them made the mistake of standing up to run. Elijah's rifle cracked, and the man fell. The others disappeared into the darkness, leaving their dead companion behind. Silence fell over the street, broken only by the sound of people crying and the ringing in Jake's ears from the gunfire. He helped Maylin to her feet. She was shaking but unhurt. Wilson rushed over. "Is anyone hit?" Doc Hartley was already moving through the crowd, checking people. "One man's been wounded. Bullet grazed his arm. He'll be fine. Everyone else is okay." Wilson looked at the body on the hotel roof. "Get him down. I want to know who he was." 2 deputies climbed up and brought the body down. Wilson rolled it over and cursed. It was one of Blackwood's men, one of the ones who had been at the ranch that morning. "That son of a bitch," Wilson said. "He just tried to kill us all. In the middle of town, in front of witnesses." "Can you arrest him?" Jake asked. "On what grounds? I can't prove he ordered this. The shooter's dead. The others got away. Blackwood will claim he knows nothing about it, so he just gets away with it for now. But this changes things. He's getting desperate. That means he's scared. And scared men make mistakes." Jake looked down at Maylin, who was clinging to his arm. "We need to end this, soon, before someone gets killed." "I'm working on it," Wilson promised. "Maria's testimony will help. And I've sent word to the territorial capital, asked for a federal marshal to come investigate, someone with more authority than me. How long a week?" "Maybe 2. That might be too long, I know. But it's all we've got." They got everyone inside and secured the courthouse for the night. Wilson posted guards at every door and window. The witnesses huddled together in the main courtroom, frightened but defiant. They had come too far to turn back now. Jake sat with Maylin in a corner, his rifle across his knees. She leaned against him, exhausted and scared, but still fighting. "I am sorry," she whispered. "Sorry you are in danger because of me. Don't be sorry. This is exactly where I want to be, even if it kills you." "Even then. Because some things are worth dying for. Freedom, justice, you." She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "I do not deserve you. Yes, you do. You deserve someone who will fight for you, who will stand with you, who will never let them make you less than human again." He kissed the top of her head, a gesture of tenderness and protection, and she closed her eyes and let herself believe for just a moment that everything might turn out all right. But outside in the darkness, Blackwood was making new plans. Plans that would force a final confrontation, plans that would end this one way or another, but the end game would not be what Blackwood imagined. 3 days later, Maria Gonzalez stood before a packed courtroom and told her story. She spoke in clear, firm Spanish translated by Tommy Chen, and every word was a nail in Blackwood's coffin. She showed her scars. She named names. She described the system of exploitation that Blackwood had built over 5 years. One by one, the other witnesses followed. 12 people, 12 stories, 12 lives broken by the same man. Judge Bradford listened to every word, his face growing darker with each testimony. When the last witness finished, he turned to Blackwood. "Mr. Blackwood, do you have anything to say in your defense?" Blackwood stood, his face red with fury. "These people are liars. They owe me money. I have legal contracts. You have fraudulent documents obtained through coercion and threats," Bradford said coldly. "I have heard enough." He rapped his gavel. "Clayton Blackwood, you are hereby charged with human trafficking, assault, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to commit murder. You will be held without bail pending trial in the territorial court. Sheriff Wilson, take him into custody." Wilson stood, a grim smile on his face. He walked to Blackwood's table and pulled out handcuffs. "Stand up, Blackwood." For a moment it looked like Blackwood might fight. His hands clenched into fists. Vernon Pike took a step forward, then stopped. He met Wilson's eyes and slowly raised his hands. "I'm done," Vernon said quietly. "I'm done following this man. I'll testify against him if you want. Tell you everything I know." Wilson nodded. "Smart choice, Pike." He cuffed Blackwood, who was now shaking with rage. "You can't do this. I have rights. I have lawyers in Denver and Washington. You have the right to remain silent," Wilson said. "I suggest you use it." As Wilson led Blackwood away, the courtroom erupted. People cheered, cried, embraced each other. Mei Lin stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. Jake put his arm around her. "Is it real?" she whispered. "Am I really free?" "You're free," he said. "Really, truly free." Judge Bradford rapped his gavel for order. When the room quieted, he said, "Miss Chen, approach the bench." Mei Lin walked forward on shaking legs. Bradford looked down at her with something like kindness in his stern face. "Miss Mei Lin Chen, by the authority vested in me by the Montana Territory, I hereby declare you free of all contracts, debts, and obligations to Clayton Blackwood or any other party. You are a free woman. Do you understand?" "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, I understand." Bradford pulled out an official document, signed it, and handed it to her. "Keep this safe. It's proof of your freedom. No one can take it from you." Mei Lin took the paper with trembling hands and pressed it to her chest. She turned to look at Jake, and the joy on her face made every moment of danger, every sacrifice worth it. The courtroom emptied slowly, people stopping to congratulate Mei Lin, to shake Jake's hand, to tell their own stories. Pastor Cross was there, weeping openly. Doc Hartley hugged Mei Lin like a daughter. Elijah lifted Jake off his feet in a bear hug. "We did it," Elijah said. "We actually did it." "No," Jake said, looking at the crowd of people around them. "They did it, all of them, together." That night, Ruth Wilson hosted a celebration at her boarding house. The dining room was packed with people sharing food and stories and hope. Mei Lin sat at the head of the table, Maria Gonzalez on one side and Tommy Chen on the other, surrounded by the community that had stood with her. Jake stood in the doorway watching her laugh for the first time since he'd known her. Really laugh, not just a small smile, but a full, genuine expression of joy. She caught his eye across the room and mouthed two words, "Thank you." He shook his head and mouthed back, "Thank you." Later, when most of the guests had gone home, Jake and Mei Lin sat on the porch of the boarding house, wrapped in blankets against the cold. The stars were brilliant, overhead sharp and clear in the winter sky. "What will you do now?" Jake asked. "You're free. You can go anywhere. Do anything." Mei Lin was quiet for a moment. "You remember what you say about rebuilding ranch, about being partners?" "I remember. The offer still stands, if you want it." "I want it," she said. "But Jake, I want to ask something. Anything. My sister, Hope. She was 15 when they take me. I do not know where she is, if she is alive, but I want to find her, before we rebuild. I need to know." Jake nodded. "Then we'll find her. I'll help you. We'll search every territory if we have to." Mei Lin reached out and took his hand. "You are a good man, Jake Thornton. Best man I ever know." "I'm just a man trying to do better than he did before," he said. "And you make me want to be better." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars, two people who had found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk toward the light together. 3 months later, spring came to Montana with a rush of green and the sound of snowmelt rushing down the mountains. Jake and Mei Lin stood on the hill overlooking Silver Creek Ranch, or what would be Silver Creek Ranch again. The old cabin was gone, burned to ash and memory. But in its place they had built something new, a larger house, solid and warm, with windows that faced east to catch the morning sun. A new barn painted red waiting for horses and cattle. Fences that stretched straight and strong across the valley. And they were not alone. Elijah had helped with the heavy timber work. Pastor Cross had organized work parties from the church. Doc Hartley had provided medical care when someone hit their thumb with a hammer. Ruth Wilson had brought food every Sunday. The Chinese community had sent workers. The Irish families had sent supplies. The whole town, it seemed, wanted to be part of rebuilding. And there was one more person. A young woman stood beside Mei Lin, looking out at the valley with wonder. She was 20 years old now, tall and slender, with the same dark eyes as her sister. Hope Chen had been found working in a laundry in Portland, Oregon. Tommy Chen had tracked her down through the network of Chinese communities along the coast. She had been freed, given travel money, and sent to Montana to be reunited with the sister she thought she'd lost forever. "It's beautiful," Hope said in Cantonese. Mei Lin translated for Jake. "It will be," Jake said, "when we're finished, but it's already home." That evening they sat on the porch of the new house, the three of them watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and red. Jake thought about Sarah and Emma buried on the hill above them. He thought about the life he'd lost and the life he was building. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I kept my promise. I'm living, really living." Mei Lin looked at him. "You talk to her, sometimes? Is that strange?" "No," she said. "It is love. Love does not end because someone dies. It just changes, becomes memory, becomes part of who you are." Jake nodded. "You're wise, Mei Lin Chen." "I learned from good teacher," she said, and squeezed his hand. 6 months later, in the autumn of 1884, Jacob Thornton and Mei Lin Chen were married in the small church in Helena. Pastor Cross performed the ceremony. Half the town attended. Hope was maid of honor. Elijah stood up as best man. Doc Hartley cried through the whole thing. When Pastor Cross asked if anyone objected, there was only joyful silence. "Then by the power vested in me, by the Montana Territory, and by God above, I now pronounce you husband and wife." They kissed, and the church erupted in applause. At the reception, Sheriff Wilson pulled Jake aside. "Got some news you'll want to hear. Blackwood was sentenced yesterday, 25 years at Territorial Prison. He'll die in there." And Vernon Pike testified against Blackwood, got 5 years for his part in it. But he is serving his time quiet. Says when he gets out he's going to try to make amends. Jake nodded. "Maybe he will. People can change. I'm proof of that." In the spring of 1885, Mei Lin gave birth to a daughter. They named her Emma Sarah Thornton, honoring the past while embracing the future. Hope cried when she heard the name. Jake held his new daughter and felt something he thought he'd never feel again, complete joy. Silver Creek Ranch became known throughout Montana Territory as a place of refuge. Women and men fleeing exploitation found shelter there. Mei Lin and Hope ran a small school teaching English and basic skills. Jake hired workers at fair wages and treated them with dignity. In 1889, inspired in part by the testimony given in Blackwood's trial, Montana Territory passed the Anti-Trafficking Act, making it illegal to hold any person in bondage through debt or coercion. It was one of the first such laws in the West. In 1890, Mei Lin opened the first school specifically for the Chinese community in Helena. She taught reading, writing, and mathematics. She taught her students that they were not property, not cheap labor, but human beings with dignity and rights. And every year on the anniversary of the day, Jake found her in the snow. They would stand together on the hill above the ranch and look out at the valley. "You saved my life," she would say. "You saved mine," he would answer. And both would be true. The wind across Montana Territory still blew cold in winter. The snow still fell deep. The mountains still rose hard and unforgiving against the sky. But Silver Creek Ranch stood warm and welcoming, a light in the darkness, proof that even in the hardest places, kindness could take root and grow. Jake Thornton lived to be 73 years old. Mei Lin lived to be 62. They had 3 children together, Emma Sarah followed by 2 sons. They died within 6 months of each other, the way people do when they've truly become one. But their legacy lived on, in the ranch that still welcomed those in need, in the school that still taught the children of immigrants, in the law that protected the vulnerable, in the stories told around fires on cold Montana nights, stories about a rancher who chose to do the right thing when it would have been easier to look away. About a woman who refused to give up, who fought for her freedom and won. About a community that stood together when it mattered most. About the promise that was kept and the life that was built from ashes and hope. The end.